Good morning, everybody. My cell phone says 11 o'clock, so I think it's time to get going. We have a lot on the schedule for the next hour and a half, and it's very exciting. And it seems like every session I've been to has been so jam-packed, and I want to spend about twice as much time talking with colleagues and with the presenters who have content experience and knowledge in the specific area that they spoke about. But here we are again at another session where we're going to have new ideas. And I hope that everybody's seated at a table where there's a poster board. If not, feel free to go ahead and move with a group of folks. We'll be doing some group work later. So first of all, hello. I think that that's the word of for the symposium is hello, to recognize each other so that nobody's transparent, so that we're saying, I see you, you're here, thank you for being here. And thank you for coming to this session. It's a session about looking beyond libraries for innovation. And I'm Bonnie Smith, I'm from the University of Florida Libraries. And Laura Lillard from the University of Washington Libraries and I have been working with 5 presenters on to examine strategies, programs that have been successful outside of academia in organization. I call them entities because it's organizations, corporations, so on and so forth. And also one of the presenters is talking about a field rather than a specific corporation. So we were looking very broadly. And I'd just like to ask folks who have gained something new to take back to their institution to raise their hands so far at the. And me too, and some of these things have come to me during the presentations with the skills knowledge of the presenters and the content of the presentations. Other things have been in these small groups where folks have had discussions that have been rich and enriching. And then other things that I'll be taking away were when we were over coffee or over lunch, and I was speaking with colleagues about some initiatives that they had at their libraries. What we really hope for this session is that the presentations and examples that our presenters will be sharing with you, there's also something for you to take away, something new, some new thoughts, and that during the discussions that those will be enriching and that you will have new connections with colleagues that perhaps you didn't know before with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our 5 presenters were selected based on their passion, based on their experience, and also their research around the topics of diversity, equity, and or inclusion. And we're very happy that we worked together for quite a long time. And I'll let now Laura introduce the presenters.
Okay. All right. So first we have Jade Alburo. You could wave your hand. Jade is librarian for Southeast Asian Studies, Pacific Island Studies, and Religion at UCLA. It's not working, it's on, but let's go up here. And we have Kathy Bradshaw, who's Assistant University Librarian for Organizational Development at Virginia Commonwealth University. We have Rudolph Clay, Head of Diversity Initiatives and Outreach Services, Washington University in St. Louis. Then we have Ariana Santiago, Open Educational Resources Coordinator, University of Houston. And then we have Jennifer Vinopal, Associate Director for Information Technology, The Ohio State University. So we're going to get started with our first presenter, which is Jade.
Yes. Is the other handheld? Yeah, because I hate standing in front of the podium because I'm short, and so.
Is this working?
Yeah. Okay. So good morning, everybody. I'm Jade Alburo, I'm the librarian for Southeast Asian Studies and Pacific Island Studies at UCLA, and I'm also the chair of the Library Diversity Committee which was reinstituted 3 years ago at UCLA. And today, I will be talking to you about working towards a target and planning for diversity and inclusion. So when we were talking about what we were going to do for this program, we were actually thinking about what company or entity we can use as an example and what successful thing that they've done at their institution. And when I was thinking about it, there were 3 institutions that I was interested in, and I finally just decided to pick Target Corporation because we're here at the mothership. And so, and also because I found that when I was doing research that they were in the Diversity Inc.'s top 50 companies for diversity. They're number 22, and actually the 2018 one just came out like last week maybe, but this was the one that I was really interested in because one of the best practices that was mentioned was that they instituted a diversity and inclusion plan in 2015, and that kind of has helped them to do what they wanted to do in terms of improving equity, diversity, and inclusion at their institution. I didn't print my notes, so that I'm like trying to figure out if I missed something. So what I tried to do more research about this, obviously, once I decided that this was the institution I wanted to do. And going back to what DeRay said yesterday, is like if you're really serious about diversity and inclusion, it shouldn't be hard to find in terms of where it is in your institution's values. And when I did look at Target Corporation website, under the purpose and beliefs, it is one of the stated 6 things that they have, which is celebrating diversity and inclusion. And so yeah, like the first 3 is all about making money, of course, because they're a corporation. But you know, the next one is diversity and inclusion. And in delving further, I found this website that was specifically on diversity and inclusion. And you know, they have a statement, sort of a diversity statement, that we believe diversity and inclusivity makes teams and Target better, and will live that belief as champions of a more inclusive society by creating a diverse and inclusive work environment, cultivating an inclusive guest experience, and fostering equality in society. And these are some of the things that they're currently doing related to diversity and inclusion. So of course, it's not just about the personnel, and it's also about their users and the community at large. And I was really interested in that because at my institution, I created this draft diversity strategic plan a long time ago. Nothing has happened out of it. And I didn't want it to be like a lot of places where it's just about programming related to personnel, but I wanted it to include everything. So it's not just about the people working there, but also about your users, and in libraries cases, collections, and all those things. Right, and so, but I really, really wanted to see their diversity plan, and so I was trying to reach out to them, but I had a hard time reaching out to somebody, and finally I did talk to Todd Williams, who's their director of diversity and inclusion. I think he's the second in command because they have a chief diversity officer. And while he didn't share it with me, he did say, well, we have this corporate social responsibility report that we do every year, and that's online. And this is the 2016 one, that's the latest they have. But in there, they have goals for 2017. And they have goals in these areas in terms of product, team, communities, and planet, which is just what I was kind of talking about. It's about your services and your collections, but also about your team who works for you and about your community in general and the planet. And in that, they included 8 diversity and inclusion goals in 3 of the areas, the top 3 areas. And these are the 8, and I kind of highlighted a little bit the team ones because those are maybe a little bit more relevant to us. And so that's achieving parity in the turnover of diverse and non-diverse members, because as he said, why should diverse people be leaving at a higher rate? And so if they're doing that, maybe you should find out why, exit interviews, and then figure out what you can do about that. Hiring diverse talent at rates higher. So they hired this company that says, oh, there's only so-and-so diverse populations in the community, so, but what you can do is then figure out why is that, and then try to change that, and then but achieving parity in diverse experiences is like, if you have the same manager, people who are diverse and non-diverse should be having the same kinds of experiences. So I'm running out of time, so I'll just go down, that's not important, and I'll finish that.
Thank you, Jade. We do have one question for you.
Oh, yeah.
So what would it take for you to implement some of these things? You mentioned that you have had a strategic plan, but what might it take for you to implement this in your own organization?
So I think that diversity and inclusion plans are actually an important step because as many people have said, speakers have said, it's like diversity and inclusive EDI work is not an add-on. So if you're really serious about it, you need to put it into writing. You need to really think about it, and having a plan is one way of doing that. You've thought about it, you've thought about what you need, and you're setting out actions, things that you can accomplish. And so, let me go to my notes. Okay, so this is kind of something I just made up yesterday, so don't take it at face value, really. And I actually added assess and audit at the beginning because I went to Kawana's talk, and she was doing the assessment about where you are in terms of diversity and inclusion at your institution. And so even though a lot of us just kind of put goals, I think that's actually a really good thing to do, so I added that in. And when I talked to Todd Williams, he says, well, setting your goals is actually 90% of the work, because then you've thought about what you need. Where do you want to be? What are your outcomes? And so then when you decide when to do that, you can figure out what the steps are. So in our cases, what our users need? What are our goals related to personnel, collection, services, outreach? And then you can specify actions. So what is causing the gap between where you are now and where you want to be? And so then what are the steps that need to be taken? You can have broader steps, or you can have really individual steps if you really want to. And then you can set timelines so that, it kind of gives you a little bit of accountability that you're going to try to work on it. Of course, you can extend your timeline. And, but at least, you have a goal. And then evaluate. So what worked, or has the things you said you want to do improved at your institution, what didn't work, what needs to be changed. And that's useful because then when you're reviewing it, because this is an iterative process, and you try to do another strategic plan for diversity and inclusion, then you can include that in what you want to do and what the next additional steps are, what else you need to do. And as Nikat, who was also speaking with Kawana yesterday, basically, equity, diversity, and inclusion is an ongoing process, and it must be a permanent part of the library's continual growth. And so that's why it would be important that when you're doing your diversity EDI plan, that once you finish the timeline, it's not the end of it. You just have to keep doing it, because unless you come into what was the last part of the continuum? What was it? The inclusivity or something. Unless you've really gotten there, then you have more work to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we have Kathy.
Good morning. This morning I'll give you two examples of two very different organizations and how they have used strategies within those organizations to increase the diversity within their employee ranks. Both of these organizations have these methods as part of their talent management strategy. And for those people who are in the audience that are not HR people, I'll define talent management strategy as a process that an organization uses specifically to recruit, retain, and develop their employees. I want people to remember that these are approaches that are used, but with some changes, I think that they can be used within academic libraries. The first example I have is from the local federal government credit union, which is in North Carolina. So if any of you are from North Carolina, you may have seen this. And I actually interviewed one of their HR VPs. And the organization is 35 years old, and it is growing. And part of their talent management strategy is to hire and promote from within. So that's a crucial part of what they do. And because they're a credit union that serves the community, they believe in hiring from within the local community. Moving around in this organization is a key part of developing their employees. Moving around is not only encouraged, but it's strongly required. Moving around and moving up. So again, what happens is when they have new opportunities, either for a new division, a new team, a new leadership opportunity, the business managers sit down with their HR people and say, okay, who's ready to go to this? Who's ready to move to this role? If they're not ready, what kinds of things need to be done to get this person ready? And I don't know how many of you do something like that. Does anybody here, is that something that's a part of your organization? No one raised their hands? One person, yay, okay. So when you look at their success, they also look at their succession plans. And again, for non-HR people, a succession plan is a formal process of saying when leaders leave, who might be next or who might be appropriate for that role. If they're not ready now, what kinds of things do we have to do to develop that person or those people to get them ready to move into higher level roles? And I think one of the biggest takeaways was the partnering with HR. Before I was a librarian, I worked in the private sector, and the private sector works very different from HR than it does in academia. Probably one of the biggest reasons is because academia is so decentralized that you have this school that does things this way, this school, etc. So that was a marked difference. My second example is from MetLife, and I used to work at MetLife, and when I was at MetLife, we were asked by a senior leader to create a program for recent college graduates so that they could specifically develop a career at MetLife. And I was a part of HR, and we developed this program. What made this program unique is we were recruiting for, I think, 5 offices across the country. And what the leader said to us is, I want people to understand that promotional opportunities or career opportunities are not just going to come from their local office. They may exist someplace else. So I need these people to get to know each other, to network. I need them to know not just each other, but the geographical area, so that when a job opens up, if you're in New Jersey and the job opens up in California, you can say, hey, I've been to California. Because part of that training program, we flew people all over the country. I know that's not a feasible thing to do within academia. But in our training program, we integrated things such as getting people together outside after work so that they could get to know each other. They could build a network. They could create a community. And you've been here for the last few days. You've heard the importance of building a community. So that's what we were doing. Again, that's not always feasible within the work that we do, but I think there are some approaches that can be adopted to that, so.
Great, thank you, Kathy. So what would it take for you to implement that in higher ed libraries?
For the first program where career movement or movement within is important, what I thought is that that could be used particularly for library staff. In my role, I'm responsible not just for the librarians, but for the staff as well. And you may not call them staff in your libraries. If you don't, I apologize. But I think all too often we forget that, that lots of people work in a library, not just librarians. And from what I've seen, a lot of times the career development or development is focused on the librarians, not the staff. And I think that that's an approach that could be adopted within academic libraries, so that when roles open up, you're looking to see who is here. If they're not ready now, what kinds of things do we need to do to get that person or those people ready? Now, I'm at a public institution, so the state controls a lot of what we do, so I do understand that in the US, I'm not familiar with the Canadian academic system, but in the US, if you're at a public institution, the state may have limits, or if you're in a unionized environment, there may be limits. But even with those limits, I think that there are things that can be done. Maybe not moving people into jobs without posting the job, because that brings up lots of other issues. But are there, say, rotational assignments that you can give to your staff? So if they work in public services, can you have them work in technical services for 3 months, or so they can see the other side of the house? In my library, I've got a department where 50% of the staff is going to leave within the next 2 to 5 years. These are all senior employees. They've been there 25, 30 years. And when those people leave, we are not going to be able to hire people with that level of experience. And there's plenty of data out there that shows when that group of employees leaves, the people who replace them, they are not going to stay there for 25 or 30 years. And so if we don't give them career opportunities, if we don't give them opportunities for growth or to do different things, they're out of there. And what that means is we're going to constantly be replacing people. Just while I was at this conference, I got somebody's resignation notice. And this person has a hard to fill job because she works our overnight shift. And you have to think about things like this. And again, so I urge people, when you're thinking about opportunities for diverse employees, don't only put that focus on your librarians or your professional level staff. And in terms of the MetLife program, I did think of that in more for librarians, but that certainly could be applied to staff as well. But the whole emphasis was on when somebody new comes to your organization, you have spent a lot of money recruiting that person. And don't just think about recruitment, you have to think about retention. We pay reload at VCU. So there have been estimates. SHRM, which is Society of Human Resource Management, says that to recruit an employee, it takes from anywhere from 6 to 9 months' salary. Depending on whether your librarians are faculty or not, it may take more than that. And recruitment encompasses more than just placing the job ads or working with the search firm. You have to think of the time in your organization that employees spend reviewing applications, interviewing people, reload costs. All of that is a factor, and you might not be tracking that. So if you spent all that money, you want someone to stay and you want someone to be there. So when you get a new employee, you think about what kinds of things do you do to introduce that person, not just to the library, but to the university community, to the external community? What kinds of steps do you take to make sure that 6 months later, that person is still saying, I'm glad I took this job? That they're not sitting there thinking, I wonder, will they take me back at my old place? The other thing in terms of diversity and inclusion, when you hire people, if people don't feel that they're a part of a community, no matter who they are, if they leave the profession, you will never diversify the senior ranks of librarianship. So the emphasis, again, not just on recruitment, but what are you doing to retain those people, and what are you doing to make sure those people feel like they are truly a part of your library and your institution? So, okay.
Okay, now we're going to have Randolph.
Good morning, everyone. In these comments, I'll be using the phrase unrepresented groups to refer to Blacks or African Americans, Hispanic or Latino, and Native Americans. Attempts to increase the makeup of underrepresented groups in professional staff in libraries has made limited progress over the past 25 years. Additional library initiatives are necessary to move the library profession forward into achieving a more diverse and representative workforce. Where are we, and what can we learn from the recruitment initiatives of other organizations? You may or may not be able to see from this slide, but let me tell you a few things here. Even though we've made progress in recruiting enrollment of our students at the undergraduate level for these three groups, we haven't made the similar progress in recruiting librarians in those institutions. So one of the things that this this chart may show you is that in 2015, the undergraduate population for African Americans was 14.1% of total enrollment in post-secondary institutions. But in libraries, there were only 8.5% representation for professional librarians, and specifically in ARL libraries, it was only 4.7. Similarly, for Hispanic or Latino students in 2015, the post-secondary population was 17.3% for their undergraduate population, but only 4.8% professional librarians across the board, and in ARL libraries, only 2.9%. And the numbers are so small for American Indian numbers, but so they're almost, it's not quite as dramatic, but in 2015, the population was only 0.8% for American Indians, and libraries across the country had a representation rate of only 0.5%, and in ARL libraries it was 0.4, so it was very low, but they were close. Well, why is all of this? Why is this important? The literature suggests that students who see authority figures who look like them feel more comfortable and affirmed that they are in the right place in our undergraduate institutions. This increases the ease of communication, fosters relationships of trust and reciprocity, and helps establish a sense of belonging and membership. A number of studies suggest that companies that are diverse in employment and other aspects tend to provide better customer service, perform better, and generally are more successful than others. And finally, diversity in higher education, the literature suggests, can foster intellectual development, contribute to reducing racial prejudice, and facilitate students' exploration of diverse perspectives. And this is students across the board. So this is an important task that we have before us. But before I move on to examples of programs outside of libraries, I do want to just briefly mention two rather new initiatives within the library world that are doing great work, and I would ask you to participate in. Many of you know that American Library Association is now in its second summer of the program of Inclusive Internship Initiative, and ARL has a similar program called Fellowship for Digital and Inclusive Excellence, and both are recruiting high school and undergraduates to consider, for programs that they would then consider library and information science as a career choice. So I want to just point out those two programs within the library field. But despite these endeavors, the progress in recruiting students of color in library and information science programs have been low. A number of organizations outside of LIS have designed pipelines to prepare and inspire students to pursue careers in their field. I have selected two brief examples that may be useful as we think about additional ways to recruit underrepresented students to careers in academic librarianship. The first is an initiative from Howard University's Center for Accounting within their School of Business. This was launched in 2014 to attract underrepresented minorities to the accounting profession. It has a five-pronged approach. There's a national marketing campaign, marketing and awareness campaign initiative was developed to highlight the benefits and intellectual rewards of accounting as a profession, and is aimed at students who are making career choices. The second prong is a middle and high school-based programs that were developed to promote accounting as a high-value career choice. These include business, career academies, summer development programs, and other programs out in the community. Additional initiatives were developed aimed at helping minority students to actually earn a CPA and other professional certifications. Internships, which is important, and career development exploration opportunities were developed to help high school students and college students become just more familiar with the accounting profession. And finally, scholarships for minority students to obtain professional degrees in accounting were widely publicized. The second program that I will talk about is a pipeline program called the Health Equity Scholars Program. It is a component of a joint program between the University of Massachusetts Medical School and the system's urban campus, the University of Massachusetts in Boston. The program has two objectives. The first is to foster graduation of the program's underrepresented undergraduate health science majors, and the second objective is to assist them to enroll later in health-related graduate programs. The three major components of the program are academic achievement, academic support, and extracurricular seminars. Academic achievement provides career planning support. Academic support provides mentoring throughout the undergraduate years to ensure that the students actually graduate in 6 years. And the third component is extracurricular seminars, which includes a paid summer internship, which requires a research project, and then an opportunity to present the research project in a public forum. Of the 16 students that were followed post-graduation from the undergraduate program, 3 were actually enrolled in a graduate program in health sciences, and 3 were applying, which gives a success rate of about 38%. Okay, so those are two programs that I think will be helpful for us as we're considering things that we can actually do to bring more students of color, have them at least consider librarianship as a career.
So, same question, asking everyone, what would it take to implement one or both of these strategies in libraries?
I think one of the things, I had started off, I mentioned the national programs, but it's going to take more of an initiative of individual libraries, but individual libraries banding together. So academic libraries, the libraries in your local area or regional, in your regional areas, could create similar type programs. One would be developing a marketing campaign where you would have students at your institution to develop marketing campaign that talks about the benefits of academic librarianship and that actually shows people of color in libraries. Because one of the things in making career choices for all of the professions that is a stumbling block is that sometimes students really don't know, well, I don't really know what people in those careers do. I mean, there's some that, legal, medicine, law, but lots of other professions, students just really don't know about them. So creating a marketing campaign, and this wouldn't just be for one library, but it could be as a number of local libraries, academic libraries would band together to do this. Obviously, having these kind of marketing campaigns, producing this literature, then going out into the schools, attending school career fairs, advertising in media that meet underrepresented youth, inviting speakers to come and discuss these types of issues at your libraries also is an effective way to bring this issue to the forefront of your peers also, that it becomes something that the library as a whole could take on, that they think this is something that's important. Collaborating with the ethnic studies departments on your program, the career services, your own student assistants, and let's not forget our own library support staff that may not have, that don't have MLSs, but that's a great group to target, and that sometimes we don't, that we overlook as far as helping them to overcome the barriers that have prevented them from actually obtaining a library degree. And then last, I would just say, developing internship programs. We've seen the one that ALA has. That's a national program where they target 50 students per year in the summer. But developing programs, local programs, it might be that you and another community college or a university would have a program where you would share the funding for a summer, providing a 6-week or a 10-week internship for a few students where they might work in a number of the libraries. So it's a large problem. It's probably not one that any one library could handle, but it certainly is one that a number of libraries could take this on and handle as a group. Thank you.
Okay, and now we have Ariana.
All right, hi everyone. So I think I need to move this. All right, the success story that I'm going to share with you today is about Coca-Cola enhancing career development for employees from underrepresented backgrounds, specifically through their company-wide mentoring program. So let's start with a little background first. So this is a case that starts with a lawsuit. In 1999, Black employees filed suit alleging that Coca-Cola systematically discriminated in promotions, compensation, and performance evaluations against salaried African American employees. They were clustered at the bottom of pay scale, routinely passed over for promotions, and paid less than their white counterparts, some of whom they supervised. The lawsuit resulted in a monetary settlement, as well as an agreement that was essentially for the company to evaluate and implement changes to HR programs with the objective of excelling at diversity, equity, and inclusion. Additionally, and this is interesting, an external task force was appointed to oversee these changes, to evaluate the company's progress, and to make recommendations that the company was bound to adopt. Over 5 years, Coca-Cola undertook a comprehensive overhaul in order to improve DEI, including having a racially and ethnically diverse workforce. So the task force addressed 9 human resources areas that you see here, but today I'm just going to focus on the mentoring program and its connection to career development. The task force defined mentoring as programs in which a coach other than an employee's supervisor assists the employee to identify and develop the experience and expertise necessary for their desired professional development. A comprehensive program was developed over 5 years. There was, of course, one-on-one mentoring, and there was also a separate executive mentoring program, which was in response to issues concerning pipeline development for the next leadership group at the company. There was group mentoring to meet the needs of the number of mentees who wanted to participate, and this is where a single mentor facilitated sessions with multiple mentees. A self-study guide was also available for those who chose not to participate in the formal one-on-one and group mentoring sessions. So this self-study was where a workbook was provided so that individuals could facilitate their own mentoring experiences. The company also offered a networking for success course after feedback showed that there was more interest in informal experiences as well as the formal parts of the program. In terms of program design, there was significant senior management sponsorship and communication, active recruitment, a formal application and matching process, and training for both mentors and mentees. Participants received support through ongoing training, access to a mentoring coordinator who followed up with the pairs periodically, as well as ongoing evaluation of the program's effectiveness. So let's take a minute and just look at the one-on-one mentoring part of this program. This started with a pilot of 100 mentor-mentee pairs and grew significantly over the 5 years that the task force looked at. So in this chart, what you see is the number of new mentees that joined the program in each year. In the second and third year, the task force started reporting how many mentees were African American or other minorities. Though sometimes that was reported as estimates and not exact numbers, so that's why I don't have exact numbers on this chart, but you can kind of get the gist of the distribution. In the fourth and fifth year, they also reported the number of Hispanic and Asian American mentees. So I included these demographics here to point out that the mentoring program was open for everyone at the company, even though part of the goal was to improve retention and promotion for minority employees. It wasn't exclusive to any of those groups. Looking at the results of the mentoring program as a whole, at the end of 5 years, 80% of the mentees remained with the company. So that chart on the left shows the demographics for those remaining mentees. The chart on the right shows how many changed position. So only 20% of those remaining people stayed in the same position, and the other 80% either had a lateral move or were promoted. So that's kind of a lot, that's good. We're almost done here. I'm not going to read all the numbers either. But here we have the demographics of those who experienced lateral moves or promotions by the end of those 5 years in the program. So as you can see, for each group, it's about half that were what the task force reported as minority employees. And that's significant and what's showing part of the success for this strategy, because according to the baseline workforce demographics, only 30% of employees at the company were minorities, with 20% being African American. So this is showing that it's outpacing the percentage of minority employees for the company as a whole. This is just listing some of the benefits of the mentoring program overall, such as being useful in assisting their development, believing the program was valuable, sharing knowledge and experiences, giving and receiving coaching, and learning something new about the company. A lot of people also said that the mentoring gave them a new appreciation for a different point of view. So the mentoring program had positive results, showing that Coca-Cola was successful in retaining and promoting minority employees. And I'll just end by reminding you that the mentoring program was one piece of a much larger initiative. It was also part of the career development program, which was meant to assist employees at all levels in defining their career objectives and develop skills needed for their desired career path.
Thank you, Ariana. Same question. What do you think it would take for academic libraries to implement a mentoring program like this?
Yeah, so I'm pulling up my notes on my phone. I don't have an exact answer for that, but I do have some thoughts and questions around that as well. So the first thing is the idea of having a specific goal for mentoring. And I don't know if that's something that we always do. When I think about the mentoring programs I see in libraries and library associations, some of them are geared towards a goal such as being more familiar with an area of the profession or being able to navigate a conference more effectively. But I think there's also a tendency sometimes to do mentoring for the sake of mentoring without thinking about to what end, what are we working towards there. So having a goal and going back and evaluating it and seeing if your program is actually achieving those goals at all. Also for Coca-Cola, the example we looked at, Their mentoring program was specifically for DEI initiatives and to improve retention and promotion of people of color at the company. And I don't know how often or if at all I've seen that in an academic library, so that's an interesting idea. The training is also important. It looks like a lot of time and training went into this initiative. And beyond just having a goal and making sure everyone has a mutual understanding of what you're working towards, you want to set people up for success and be equipped to work towards that together. So I don't know what Coca-Cola's training really entailed or looked like, but I imagine that could include training on things like coaching and how to give feedback, facilitating discussion, active listening, things like that, that could actually really improve the ability of people to foster and participate in a meaningful relationship instead of just saying, okay, you're paired up now, be a mentor, be in this mentoring relationship, but so sort of thinking about what goes into that relationship. Another thing I'm thinking about is the accountability aspect, because realistically, this wouldn't have happened if Coca-Cola hadn't been sued, right? And there was that really interesting piece of the external task force that evaluated and assessed their progress and said, here's what you have to do. So it made me think, as libraries, who's holding us accountable in a similar way? Can we hold ourselves accountable in that way? Or do we need an external body or just fresh eyes from the outside that can look at our organizations maybe more clearly than we can ourselves and say, okay, here's what the situation is, here's what needs to change, and now do it. So I don't know if that's what we need or what that would look like, but it really stuck out to me because it was very much a driving factor in the example that I was looking at. And my last point that I'll leave with draws from DeRay McKesson's talk yesterday, which was very inspiring and has left me with a lot of things that I'm still thinking about. So he talked about the ability to imagine a world without constraints, right? So in terms of mentoring for career development for people of color, it made me ask the question for myself, when these programs are successful, is it because they're training people of color to more effectively navigate oppressive systems that they have to work within? Or are they effective because they're actually working to change those systems and structures to remove those constraints altogether? I don't know, but I think it's certainly something to think about.
Final presenter is Jennifer.
Hello. Okay. To achieve diversity, focus on inclusion. Case of T-Mobile. Underrepresented people, we've heard this many times over the past couple days, underrepresented people won't choose to work with us or continue to work with us if our workplaces are not inclusive. So here's how T-Mobile does inclusivity. They're proud and vocal about their diversity, their inclusivity, and their ethics. So on their website, it's very easy to find all the screenshots that I've included today. They state that they're proud of supporting the troops, their design, that they are diverse by design. They have unlimited pride. They are going green, and they are committed to ethics. 62% of their staff are from minoritized racial or ethnic groups, and 42% of their workforce is women. 57% of their customers are from minoritized racial or ethnic groups, compared with 32% for their competition. These numbers are all on their website. In terms of ethnic and racial diversity, they are light years ahead of the library profession, which, as we all know, is, according to some measures, 88% white. So how do they do it? They do several things that libraries don't. T-Mobile is purposeful, strategic, and they spend time and money on building alliances with national organizations to help them move their diversity and inclusion agendas forward. So to expand supplier diversity, they work with all of these national and regional business organizations that I won't read for you. But I will say that T-Mobile doesn't just hope for diversity in their supply chain. They go out and find it. So I would ask you, what are we as a profession doing in our libraries to diversify our supply chain or aspects of our profession that are like our supply chain? As well, T-Mobile doesn't just take inclusivity for granted. They measure how they're doing through assessment tools. They've achieved top scores according to 3 inclusion indices that I include screenshots for here. The Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index, which measures corporate policies and practices pertinent to LGBTQ employees, the Military Friendly Company Survey, and the Disability Index of the American Association of People with Disabilities. They have received other such awards and recognition, notably from Forbes and Fortune magazines and the U.S. Business Leadership Network, and then they trumpet their results on their website. So how do these measurement tools work? I'll use the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Survey as an example here. It measures inclusivity in these areas: non-discrimination, equal employment opportunity policy, spousal and partner benefits, transgender inclusive benefits, organizational LGBTQ competency, public engagement, which means how they market and recruit and also their legal support for the LGBTQ community. Are they involved in any legal initiatives on behalf of this community? And then their LGBTQ policies in their international operations. Other tools that I looked at will include a question about whether or not you have an inclusivity and diversity policy. Do you have affinity groups in your organization? What does the support look like from senior leadership? And do you use employee engagement survey? And I would ask, where are the inclusion assessment tools for libraries? We did hear yesterday from Kawana Bright about one tool that's being developed, but where are the rest of our assessment tools? What about the nationally prominent rewards and recognition for library achievement and inclusion? How do we know what works and what doesn't if we're not measuring it? Now, I want to note that it's hard to know, thank you, what these T-Mobile staff numbers really mean: 62% minoritized people and 42% women. We need to know, is there diversity evenly distributed throughout their organization, or is it concentrated at lower levels? They don't give the answers, but if you look at the senior leadership, there are 17 white presenting people, 15 masculine presenting, and only 3 feminine presenting. So that does raise questions. As well, I'll note that this headline, T-Mobile, Amazon, and other companies are accused of using Facebook ads to exclude older Americans from jobs. So this is a lawsuit was filed in 2017. So I would say these questions about T-Mobile's leadership, their vertical diversity distribution, and their ageism notwithstanding, they are still doing a whole heck of a lot better than we are in libraries. So we measure what we value, right? If we're not identifying appropriate measures for inclusion, assessing it, learning from our assessments, and putting real resources behind this, we're not doing all we can to create inclusive workspaces. And if we're not creating inclusive workspaces, no matter how hard we say we're working to do this, underrepresented people aren't going to want to work with us. Libraries should consider following T-Mobile's model and these other organizations and fields models in adopting or developing inclusive or inclusivity assessment tools to understand how we're doing and learn how to do it better.
Thank you, Jennifer. So you said we don't know some of what T-Mobile's doing to get to these numbers. So I don't know which piece you would like to address, but how would we either implement the inclusivity tools or get to the numbers that they have?
So I'll just suggest 3 things. One is that we can look at the inclusivity tools that already exist. So I mentioned 3. They're very easy to find. You just have to Google them. I downloaded them. I looked at them. I can upload them to the Google Drive. And you can start using them. They're right there for free to use. You don't even have to pay for it. You can talk to Kawana Bright and find out what she's doing. And I know that you just learned about someone else just yesterday who's also working on some kind of assessment tool. So there's probably work going on that we don't even know about in libraries that we should probably know about and start thinking about adopting these tools. And then we can leverage existing tools. For example, in a previous institution where I worked, we used Climate Qual. Although Climate Qual doesn't do, the kind of intensive assessment that some of the tools that I mentioned today are doing. If you have a large enough institution, you can look at how the results are kind of sliced and diced, and with a demographic overlay. So you can find out, for example, if there's some concerns about psychological safety within your organization, whether or not there are different groups of people or of different identities who are experiencing psychological safety or psychological lack of safety differently. So there may be things that we're already doing that can point to some areas for improvement.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. So now what we're going to do is we're going to really turn towards each other as colleagues at your tables. And there's some large poster boards there. I don't know if they're not called, they're like Post-it things. And there's some, sorry, my brain's not working now. Maybe I'm hungry, I'm not sure. But there's some markers there. The idea, and we'll be distributing sort of summary statements about each one of the strategies that the presenters gave today. And each table can decide whether they want to discuss one strategy in particular or like to address multiple ones, or perhaps there's a strategy that you come up with that combines some of these and that you would like to discuss. So we're not going to dictate or even suggest what strategy you should discuss in your tables, and you can decide that. I'd suggest that one person be a scribe. We would like to capture the thoughts from the different tables, so if somebody would write down some of the major thoughts in your group, that would be fantastic. At the end of, we're going to give about 20 minutes for these discussions. It's not a lot of time, and I keep feeling rushed, and I know, and I'm sorry for that. I'm rushing you again, but we're going to give you 20 minutes, and then we're going to give time for folks to actually walk around and read what other groups have written, and you will have an opportunity at that point to use the little Post-it notes if you want to comment on top of the comments and the things from a group. So this is trying to do something a little bit different and have interaction that's not always talking, but that perhaps is written. We will then take photograph of all the posters, and we will post them on the Google Drive, where you will be able to find them and look at what your colleagues have added to your information. The presenters will be available. They'll be walking around. So if there's a particular strategy that you wanted to find out more about, they'll be available to speak to your group. And let's see, did I miss anything? No. So go ahead and you can start working in your groups and discussing.